We've had a good weekend. Um, Yesterday was a special day. What did we celebrate yesterday? Independence Day, Liberty. Um, I saw at least a couple of shirts in here that kind of reflected that, which is kind of cool, really. I'm just kind of curious. What is something that you do on the Fourth of July to celebrate? Fireworks, watermelon, hamburgers and hot dogs. Man, I missed out on the hot dog thing. Man, ask God to bless the USA. Yeah. Anything else? Just a fun time. Get together with family, and this one was, I guess, kind of special because it was 250 years. Um, why? Why do we even celebrate the Fourth of July or Independence Day? Just just a little background, a rehash on a story that you already know, I'm sure. But about 250 years ago, there was a huge disagreement over the way Great Britain governed the American colonies and the way that the colonies thought that they should be treated. So there was a big disagreement about that. The American colonists felt that they deserved the right to have the rights of the Englishmen. After all, most of them were English, um, and yet they were not given those rights, and they felt oppressed. And so the British, on the other hand, on their side of it, they thought the colonies were created to be used in the ways that best suited the crown or the parliament. And so there was a big disagreement there. So, giving the colonists their rights just really wasn't necessarily high on their list, the Parliament of the Crown's list. So, after much debate, on July the 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress voted in favor of independence. Right? You all know the story. But they voted for independence, and 2 days later, the delegates from the 13 colonies came together and adopted what we call now the Declaration of Independence. And it was really a big deal. It changed the world, really. It changed the world. And the 4th of July celebrates the birth of American independence from the Great British Empire. That was a big deal, wasn't it? And we celebrate that every year. But today in this country, today this country is independent from other countries. I want you to think about what it did. This country is independent from other nations. We have self-government. Sometimes we agree with it, sometimes we don't, but we do have self-government. We have a Bill of Rights, which guarantees our basic rights. We live in the best country in the world. I'm convinced of that. And some people living in this country have no idea why we celebrate the 4th of July. Just a holiday. We get a day off. That's the big thing. We get a day off and we get to go to the pool. Oh, yeah, that's one we forgot. People like to go swimming, I guess. And it's a shame, really, that so many don't really know what it's about. It's kind of crazy. I say all that to say this. There's another special day that many people don't know about. Don't celebrate it. In fact, we usually don't. It's not the 4th, but the 24th of May this year. It was the 24th of May this year. Does anybody happen to know what this special date was? Or is? I mean, I told you the date. Come on, tell me what it is. Let's get it. No, it's not my birthday. Um, and for those that would like to know, my birthday, in case you were just dying to buy me gifts, August the 11th. Okay? But no, May 24th this year is the day of Pentecost. 49 days after the resurrection, the church began. Okay? So, it's our true Independence Day. We can talk about being independent from other governments and nations and things like that. The Pentecost is our true Independence Day, our eternal Independence Day. Okay? Now, I want to talk about this for a few minutes because it's something that I think the churches used to celebrate this day, and I don't know that they have for a few hundred years or so. But I want to find out about this idea and kind of discuss this idea about how we are oppressed. You remember the reason that they claimed their independence against the British is they felt oppressed. How are we oppressed? And so that's kind of what I want to talk about. And you might be thinking, we're not oppressed, we're Americans. That's how we feel in the South, right? We're Americans. We're not oppressed. But I want you to notice something. In John chapter 8, verse 34, notice what Jesus said. Jesus answered them, and he's talking to the Jews, the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, that type thing. And he says, most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits sin is what? A slave to sin. That is pretty plain spoken, isn't it? Whoever commits sin is a slave to sin. So, let me ask you a question. What are we being oppressed by? Sin. Ourselves. Our own sin. The term is interesting. He uses this term. The term slave described people who were under complete authority to a master. Think about that. Slave described people who are under complete authority to a master, and yet he says we are a slave to sin. These people that were slaves, they were owned, they were bought, they were sold, and they could not change their status as a slave. There was nothing they could do. That's just the way it was. And this term, I think, was used to illustrate how sin could completely dominate our lives. Would you agree with that? Jesus is emphasizing the controlling and destructive power that sin exerts over our lives, over someone's very being. And so slavery to sin is understand, slavery to sin is not just doing bad things. We all do bad things, right? So slavery to sin is not just about doing bad things. Rather, it is a condition of the heart in which a person is compelled to act against God's righteousness. Follow me? Slavery to sin prevents true freedom. Now, we've been celebrating freedom the last day or so, but I want us to really concentrate on the freedom that we need, the freedom that we have as Christians, because it's amazing and it needs to be celebrated. We need to celebrate this. Look at Romans. There's a lot to say in Romans about this, but in Romans chapter 6, verse 16, and I put the NIV up there because it makes it a little easier to understand. Paul in Romans can get just a little wordy from time to time, but to be honest. But listen to what he says. Don't you know that when you offer yourself to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. Now I'm going to pause for a second and just let that sink in a minute. In fact, let's read it again. Let's think about this. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves to the one that you obey? Whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. So, where does slavery to sin lead? Death. We think it's not a big deal, don't we? In this world today, sin's nothing. It's just common. So what? Everybody does that. It leads to death, is what he just said. The Lord wants us to understand just how serious this really is. Now, I want to go back for a minute to the passage in John that we looked at, because it gives us some practical insight as to what slavery to sin looks like. So I'm going to go back to John chapter 8, and let's look closely here. Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall" what? "Set you free," or make you free. And they answered him, "We're Abraham's descendants. We've never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free?" And Jesus answered them, "Most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave to sin. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but the Son abides forever. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed." What sets us free? Truth. Truth sets us free, right? The truth of Jesus. The truth that Jesus presents to us. Whatever he sets forth, that truth sets us free. Now, in verse 33, it's interesting that the Pharisees say, "Oh, we've never been slaves to anyone." Do you think that's true? Can you think of some people that the Israelites have been slaves to? What? Yeah, probably quicker to mention the ones they haven't been slave to. How about Egypt? How about Babylon? How about the Assyrians? We could go on. You can look at Judges and see all the ones that oppress them, right? What? Persians, Greek. Romans right now, as they speak, they are under bondage to Romans, and they say, "Oh, we've never been under bondage to anyone." Wow. Wow. But let's focus for a minute. I want to focus for a minute on why they were under bondage to sin. Okay? We know they were in bondage. They were in bondage to the Romans, but that was a physical thing. Bondage to sin is more important, isn't it? It's a bigger deal. So I want to discuss for a minute why they were in bondage to sin. Can you think of some sins that the Pharisees were in bondage to or slave to? Pride? Jealousy? What else? What? Wrath? How about lying? We've never been in bondage to anyone. What else? Hatred? Okay. So when you're a slave to sin, you're separated from God. Okay, let's just let that sink in a minute. When we are a slave to sin, we are separated from God. And I'm going to tell you something, that hurts my heart to even think about being separated from God. It hurts my soul. And it leads to a distorted moral judgment. In other words, you don't even recognize that you're in the sin. Because our moral judgment becomes so distorted and so skewed that it becomes normal to us. Do you think the Pharisees thought that they were guilty of sin? No, they thought they were righteous. And yet you just named a half a dozen or so sins that they were slave to. Not that they committed once in a while, but it was a constant thing with them. They didn't even realize it. You think that happens today to people? Absolutely it does. Because sin can become a habit. It becomes a habit, and we don't even recognize that it's there. And we're guilty of anything. We think we're righteous. Now, understand, this is very different. What I'm saying is very different from a child of God who makes a mistake or sins unknowingly or something like that. We all do that. I'm talking about living in habitual sin and not even recognizing it. These Pharisees were planning, think about this. Talk about sin. They were planning to murder Jesus. That was their goal. They were planning to murder Jesus, but with their distorted moral judgment, they couldn't see that they were slaves to the sins of hatred. Why did they want to kill him? Because they hated him. Because they were jealous of him. They were under this bondage of sin, of hatred and jealousy. And they couldn't even see it. They thought that they were planning to murder someone. Isn't this interesting? They thought they were planning to murder someone because of their righteousness. How does that even work? How can you plan to murder someone? Wait, isn't that one of the 10 Commandments? Wow. They didn't see it in themselves. They didn't see it. They thought they were righteous people. And yet sin had them in bondage. They were slaves to sin. You know, I went to church with someone a long time ago, worked with him for a little while. And he lied all the time. There was no reason for it. I don't know. Maybe to make him look better. Maybe he was insecure. I don't know the reason. But he lied all the time. He lost his job because of that. Because he just constantly lied. And it had become a habit that he had fallen into. And his moral judgment became distorted. And I don't think he even realized there was a problem. It just became a part of who he was. That's what sin can do to us. Satan's not stupid. He knows how to get us. This gentleman, this man was a slave to sin. What are some other sins that we can become enslaved to? Y'all help me out. Covetousness, okay. That's a big one, isn't it? What else? Greed, okay. Idolization, okay. What else? What else? Jealousy? Anger? Alcoholism? Drugs? Right? Pornography? The silent sin that kills? That nobody knows about because you can hide it easily on your device? In other words, there's so much that we can get trapped by and we don't even recognize it. We don't even realize it. Do any of y'all get angry? Man, I do. Here we go. So there are these sins that we can become enslaved to, but we don't even recognize that we're enslaved to these sins. You know, these things, they can control our lives. We think, some stupid reason, we think we're in control. And yet our sin can control our lives. And so it takes away our freedom. And so that all sounded a little negative, and I don't want to be negative this morning. So let's talk about our freedom. Okay? That'll be more fun. Let's talk about our freedom. Our Independence Day. Our freedom was not bought by a signed document, like our freedom was from other nations in 1776, right? It was divine intervention. Our freedom from sin is because of divine intervention. Let's look at a passage. You may be familiar with it in Romans chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. But God demonstrated his own love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. Now, think about it and look at the passage. What did the Lord do for us? What did the Lord do for us to obtain our independence? What? Gave his son. We gained our independence. It was bought, not with a signed document, not even with the shed blood of many who fought for the country as we know of. The shed blood of God's Son. What a high price our independence was. Our independence was through the blood of Jesus. Now, let's go back to Romans 6 that we looked at it a minute ago. In Romans 6, verses 16 through 18. Follow me here. The part we read a minute ago says, don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one that you obey, whether you're slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You have been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness. Wait a minute. Isn't that weird? We're set free from sin. Yay! But now you're slaves again to righteousness. See, slavery to Christ is not a bad thing, is it? Slavery to righteousness is a good thing. And so this past, a minute ago, we looked at what the Lord did to obtain our independence. It was through the blood of Jesus, right? Now I want to ask you from this passage, what did we do to obtain our independence? What does it say? What? Obey from your heart. Obey righteousness. You remember the choice that was given that in the first part of this passage that we're obedient slaves, either to one or the other. Is it to sin or to righteousness? To sin leads to death. To righteousness leads to what? Life. So we obtain our independence through the obedience from our heart. And I want you to think about the great celebration that happened on the very first day of Pentecost, 49 days after the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. The first day the world threw off their chains from sin was on that day of Pentecost in AD 30. What an amazing day. What an amazing day. What significant thing? I just want to ask you, let's just get this all together. What significant thing happened on that day? Day of Pentecost, AD 30. First gospel sermon, what? Power of the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles. They began to speak in other tongues and everything. What else? 3,000 souls were saved. This sounds like the beginning of something big, doesn't it? It was the beginning of what we are involved in right now. It was the beginning of the church. It was the beginning of that institution that Jesus gave his blood for, his life for, that saves souls. Truly, Independence Day. What an amazing event. What an amazing day. To be able to know that we have freedom from the bondage of sin. And we can't have it forever. We can have it forever. I say, let's just stay free. You with me? Let's just stay free from it. But we have to face the reality. Just think about it. Just because we have a Declaration of Independence in this country, are we as Americans guaranteed to stay free? No. We can lose it. We can lose this freedom. The Declaration can be turned to nothing. We can lose our freedom. That's a reality. So to stay free from sin, this is kind of weird, but to stay free from sin, we need daily dependence on God's strength. Through prayer, Bible study, fellowship with each other to stay free from sin. Isn't it ironic that to be independent from sin, we must be dependent upon God? We talked about that in a sermon some time back. But to be independent from sin, from a slavery of sin, we have to become dependent upon God, upon prayer, on Bible study, fellowship with one another, with other Christians who have been freed from sin, so that we can encourage each other. Because if not, we can lose it. There are a lot of religious groups out there and people that'll say, once saved, always saved. That is absolutely not what the Bible teaches. We can lose it. And this is the reason that we have to, this is the reason do you realize that we've had daily Bible readings in this church, in this congregation, since day one? Through our messenger in different ways. I know we're reading the Bible together right now, from beginning to end, together and discussing it. And I think that's been great for many of us. It's been great for me. I've really enjoyed it. But since we began this congregation here in Blountsville, we've had daily Bible readings. Maybe everybody hasn't participated. Maybe everybody has. But it's there. Because we need that strength. We need the strength of God's Word. We need the strength of doing things together. And so we have opportunities for fellowship. We have opportunities for fellowship on Sunday morning, even before services when we. The last Saturday of the month, and when we get together and give away food and clothing and things for people in need, and that's a time for fellowship that we overlook. We don't take advantage of sometimes. We have an opportunity for fellowship on the ladies got together this Thursday evening. Many of you got together and had some great fellowship together. And so fellowship is so important. So important. We probably need to do more. I'm sure we do. But it gives us time to encourage each other. It gives us time to strengthen one another. And so what it boils down to is we need to be determined to stay free. Because Jesus gave his blood for us. We need to be determined to stay free. But there are things that we hold on to. I mean, let's just be real. There are things that we sometimes hold on to that cause us to fall back into the same trap. Would anybody disagree with that? We won't let go. We just won't let go. It may be addictions. It may be thoughts that we have. It may be things that we like to look at on the internet. It may be just ideas that keep coming back to us that will cause us to fall back into the slavery of sin because we just don't want to let go. We have trouble letting go. And I think about that and I think, well, you remember the Israelites back in the time of Moses? You remember they had been slaves for 400 years in Egypt, remember? They've been slaves for nearly 400 years in Egypt. And when they came out of Egypt, they went straight and they were going along and the Egyptians started following them and they met with the Red Sea and their first problem. Oh no! The Red Sea. You know what they wanted to do? Turn around and go back. Turn around and go back to slavery. Why? Because it was easier. And we read about that and we think about that and we think, those people are so dumb. Why would they want to go back to slavery? And we don't even realize that we do the same thing. And then but we never say, why are we so dumb? They wanted to go back because freedom was too hard. It took effort. When they got to the Red Sea, which is the first challenge they faced, they wanted to go back because they wanted to go back to what was comfortable. I mean, they had been in it for 400 years. Well, not all of them, because none of them are 400 years old probably, but they wanted to go back into what they knew, into where they came from, into what they were comfortable with, the only life they really knew, which was slavery. But when they were in it, they wanted out of it. Oh, but we didn't know we was going to have to work for this. We didn't know it was going to take effort. We didn't know it was going to take all this faith stuff. Let's just go back. Back there, we had stuff to eat. We had it made. Really? Being beaten by slaves, building cities, making bricks. They had freedom in their sights, but they wanted to go back because that was easier. See, here's the thing. Here's the thing that we need to understand. That if you fail to press forward, you will fall back into your old patterns. When we become Christians and we try to get the things in our lives and we put them behind us, we've got to press forward to better things. We've got to press forward to righteousness. Because if we don't go forward, we will divert back to our old habits. Just the way it is, to our old pattern of life. Look at Ephesians chapter 4. Listen to what Paul said here. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 24. Listen to this carefully because I'm going to ask you a question about it in a minute. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. Now look at this passage for a minute. It talks about the new person who is no longer a slave to sin. What are some characteristics of this person that is no longer a slave to sin? Because we need to learn this so that we can be no longer slaves to sin. What are some characteristics you see here of this person? What? Renewed. Renewed by what? The spirit of your mind. In other words, what? Change the way we think. We learn to think like the Spirit and through the Spirit. Very good. What else? Created according to God. What does that mean? What do you think that means? Created according to the pattern that God designed for us. Created according to what God designed us to be. He designed us to be His special people. But we mess that up. But we renew in our minds to become what He designed us to be, according to the creation of God. What else do you see? Anything else? In order to do that, what do? You put off concerning your what? Your old way, your former conduct. In other words, if we are going to actually not be a slave to sin, we can't act like we did once. We have to change the way we live, change the way we think, change the way we act, change the people we hang out with, change whatever is necessary for us to live according to the creation of God. You see anything else? It means that we are, and we've already discussed it, but we're putting on a new man. We're no longer that person anymore. These people, these Israelites that came up out of Egypt, they were no longer slaves. They were free people. They you know what they became? God's special, chosen people. They weren't who they used to be. They were a new people. They were God's special people. Created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. You see, but my favorite part of this is what Patrick brought up just a minute ago, is renewed in the spirit of your mind. What does that do? It changes something here, doesn't it? It gives us a new heart. We read in other places in the Bible, Lord, give us a new heart. Not a hardened heart, a new heart. And it's this new heart. It's this new heart that will help us break free from that old pattern. And it'll keep us free. We can't keep the same heart, the same love, the same desires, and still be free from sin. It just can't be done. It can't. Because we'll fall back into it. Now, the best part of all this, the slave to righteousness has hope. The slave to righteousness has assurance. And we know this, we've talked about this before, but this hope isn't the kind of hope where we say, oh, I hope I get a new car for Christmas. That's not the kind of hope this is. He talks about hope and assurance. It's hope with assurance. This hope we have is a guarantee because Jesus gave us His blood. He shed His blood for us. He made promises. He's never failed to keep a promise. God always keeps His promises. So it's not a hope like this wishy-washy, well, I hope, I'm about to blow out my birthday candles, if I can blow out that many of them. And I'm about to blow, ready? Oh, but I have to make a wish. I have to hope for something. That kind of hope is useless compared to what the hope we have here. Does that make sense? This hope is an assurance. But look at the passage in Romans chapter 8. I want you to listen to this. This is so telling to me. In Romans 8, beginning in verse 13, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. I'm just going to stop there because, man, did he put it out there. If you live for the desires of the flesh, if your life is all about what you can get in your life in the flesh, and your desires and your wants and your desires fleshly, you're going to die. Spiritually. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, These are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. Adoption by God? What? Serious? Listen to this again. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage, again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs. Heirs of God. And joint heirs with Christ. If indeed we suffer with Him, that we may also be glorified together. This passage always gives me chills. Especially when it says that we are joint heirs with Christ. You recognize that what God is doing is putting us on a level plane with His Son. We are His children. That, my beloved friends, is amazing. Instead of being slaves to sin, we become children of God. Let me ask you real quick, what are some benefits to being a child of God? Huh? Inherit the kingdom of heaven. Boom. Man. We inherit because we are heirs. Kingdom of heaven. We inherit all that God has to offer. Anything else? Yes. This term, Abba, Father. Abba is an endearing way of saying Father. It's like a little child saying Daddy. That's what that means. It's like a child saying Daddy. How endearing is it for a little child to come up and hold out his arms and say, Daddy. It's not to take away from the reverence that we have for God our Father, but that's the closeness that He wants us to have with Him. And I never cease to be amazed by that. Any other things that advantages to being a child of God? I mean, that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Forgiveness, righteousness, a change of heart, a family to belong to of other Christians. A God that doesn't tolerate me talking to Him, He wants me to talk to Him. Because He is Daddy. Independence Day, I mean, it's a great holiday. But as Christians, we need to recognize that our true independence happened when we became dependent on God. I want to go back for just a second to what Jesus said said in John. That He said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. You remember that? Then you will know the truth, and the truth will what? Will set you free. What truth? The truth is that Jesus has the words of life. Learning about Him and obeying His words is the path to freedom, to true freedom. Let His words transform you. Oh, we can hear His words and we can ignore them. We can hear His words and study His word, but if we don't let them affect us, if we don't let them transform us, we might as well have never heard them. Let his words transform you so that you can throw off those bonds of sin, that slavery to sin, and become a child of God who has hope, who has assurance of eternal life. As you said, the entrance into the kingdom of heaven. Guess what he's saying here is, and what I'm saying is, come to Jesus. Follow Jesus. Because there will be rejoicing in heaven. Last week, when we were up on the mountain having our worship service, you remember I was talking about the celebration, the joy of the angels in heaven when one sinner is found. We were talking about the lost coin and everything. When one sinner, one lost soul is found, the party that goes on in heaven. Can you imagine this Independence Day? You talk about we got some fireworks the other day and shot them off, and it was a lot of fun. Can you imagine a firework display in heaven? I know there's not really one, so to speak. Can you imagine Independence Day in heaven? When one who is a slave to sin becomes a slave to righteousness, probably the best fireworks show you will ever see. Ever. You want heaven to rejoice? No longer be a slave to sin. Put it away. We, even as Christians, get caught up in that, and we fall back if we're not careful. We're going to sin once in a while, but don't fall into the practice of sin. Don't become a slave to sin. If you're not a Christian this morning, I want to give you the opportunity to put off slavery. Today's Freedom Day. Today's Independence Day. If you're subject to the invitation, come while we stand and sing.